I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, women in India are groped, teased, and harassed on a daily basis, if not worse. But ever since the gang rape and death of a medical student last year, Indians are getting vocal about demanding a change in attitude toward women. But is their louder voice making a difference, or have things returned to the status quo? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, a lot of folks in our community talking about what they think is the significance of visibility in the media when it comes to these issues.
Right, and so we asked our community whether or not they think that, the media has unfairly portrayed the so-called rape culture in India, and we got varied responses, like this one on Twitter from Brown Hameen, who says, "I think so. Such incidents happen in different countries around the world, but the one popularized is India's." But then on the other hand, we got one more from Emily, who says, "No, it's not possible to over-dramatize raping any woman." Now, for those of you at home, we want to know what you think as well. So join the conversation by tweeting us with the hashtag AJStream.
And joining us in studio is Malika Dutt. She is the president and CEO of Breakthrough, a global human rights organization. Malika, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. We're going to have a terrific group of guests in our Google Hangout as well. They're all going to bring a unique perspective to what's happening in India. And you too can hang out with us. Just click on the link below and add us to your circles.
Hi, I'm Shirley Sabalian. I'm the Secretary of the Society of Transsexual Women of the Philippines, a pioneering trans activist org from the Philippines, and I'm in the stream.
Eve-teasing. It's a phenomenon in India where women are stalked, groped, or teased in public. It's an endless nuisance, both subjugating and humiliating, that makes just walking out of the house a challenge for many women. This public service announcement is a pretty good example of what we're talking about.
Sorry.
क्या हो रहा है ये?
हाथ फिसल गया था।
तुम लोगों की हाथ जलती अंगीठी और बिजली के नंगे तारों पे क्यों नहीं फिसलते?
चलता है ना अंकल, छोड़ो ना।
अच्छा, अपनी सगी बहन के कंधे पे कभी हाथ फिसला है तुम्हारा?
ओ अंकल, हाथ था, फिसल गया, सॉरी बोलता है। सरक सरक
हाथ था, फिसल गया, सॉरी बोलता है।
Last year, the Hindustan Times published some alarming statistics. It said 9 out of every 10 women in urban India have been stalked, teased, or sexually harassed. 7 out of 10 who went to the police found that law enforcement's attitude was, quote, unhelpful. Of course, the harassment and objectification leads to far more violent and extreme behavior. Here are 2 reports from Indian TV. First is IBN Live from June. The second is a 2009 report by Times Now Online.
Shocking pictures attacking the woman. He's been identified as a Guwahati businessman, Ratul Burman. She was first stripped by 2 local shopkeepers, then attacked, and the attack then turned into a public spectacle with others joining in.
It all happened in broad daylight on one of the city's busiest roads near Gandhi Maidan. Not a single man in the entire crowd dared intervene, and if that wasn't enough, the police arrived half an hour late, watched the show for another hour before taking the culprits to the police station.
These reports are not uncommon, and rarely do they get international coverage. But last December, that changed when a 23-year-old medical student was brutally gang raped on a bus and then died from her injuries. It ignited widespread anger and protests in India and even around the world. Responding to public outrage, the government just recently passed a new law with tougher punishments for rape and stalking. But are the new laws enough to break down these long-standing cultures of harassment and violence without consequence? To talk about the cultural and legal challenges is Nishi Kant. He joins us on the phone. He and his 2 brothers run an organization called Shakti Vahini, which works for the rights of women and children in India. Joining us on Skype is Ranjana Kumari, director of the Center for Social Research in New Delhi. And in our Google Plus Hangout is Naintara Janardhan. She is a staff member at Saka Cabs for Women. She's also in New Delhi. And Manisha Mohan is one of the inventors of anti-sexual assault underwear. It's called Society Harnessing Equipment. Can't wait to hear more about that. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Malika, I want to start with you. We saw massive protests after the rape and death of this woman in December. Everything from protests at the chief minister's house to people gathering outside parliament, clashes with police. What's changed since then?
A lot has changed since then. The conversation around violence against women and what happens to women at home and on the streets has really entered, I think, the mainstream of Indian society in a way that it never has before. We've had some amazing legislation passed recently at rapid speed. I mean, these are laws that we've been trying as the women's movement in India to get pushed through for a really long time. And there's a whole attention to this set of issues that has pushed the government to act speedily and in ways, including around the trial of the rapists in this recent incident. The other thing that I think that is really different from previous situations is that young men and men from all walks of life are joining women in demanding a change to this set of issues and to the violence that women face. And that's a new phenomenon. We've never seen men hit the streets the way they did post the Delhi gang rape before on a women's rights issue.
You know, I want to get to Nishi Kant. He's the co-founder of Shakti Vahini, which is an organization in India that works for the rights of women and children. Nishi, thanks for joining us. Talk a little bit about what Malika has brought up, this engagement by men, and what effect you think these new laws that we were just talking about are going to have, if any.
Yes, the thing is that we have been seeing a lot of stories in the media about the crime against women, about human trafficking, about forced labor, child labor, rape, and it was slowly boiling. But it was a time for more outrage. It touched each and every one of us. People said, I need to do something. My sister, my daughter, my mother could be in such a position. I need to do something, and that's how everyone felt from their heart, and that was the reason of that huge uproar in Delhi. Mm-hmm. And also, one thing is of a concern is that all this was a media hype in Delhi and in the big cities, but in the large rural hinterland of women, there is less awareness, and that is where we need to fight it out. The challenge ahead of us is all about implementation of the law.
And how difficult is that going to be? Because we know India likes its laws. There are a lot of good laws on the books in India. The problem is implementation and enforcement. I mean, you go to India and you realize that, you know, it's like, this is a law, abiding by it, optional. How do you change the culture? How do you get that fundamental shift where people really are going to, including police and the Justice Ministry, want to enforce these laws, want to see them have an effect?
Yeah, see, there are lots of law in country like India, but the implementation is a part where we are failing or we are lagging. The only thing ahead of is that we need to sensitize this police, law enforcement agencies, the prosecutors, the judiciary, so that we can inculcate into a better result for the women and children in our country.
You know, we're talking about the problems and then the trouble and challenges of implementation. It starts, Joseph on Twitter says, with stopping using the phrase eve-teasing and calling sexual harassment for what it is. Ranjana, I want to go to you now because I think this begs the question whether or not social pressure could do more than a law.
Well, what happened is due to the social pressure, you know, it's been 3 decades of our hard work in mobilizing women from village to village, from every nook and corner of the city, that the whole strength. I mean, as one of the first who mobilized, I myself took the first rally in front of the police station after the rape case. And then, of course, JNU students, IIT students, we all joined together, and then we collected at India Gate. And somebody who has been part of organizing, mobilizing, and sustaining the struggle for the whole of that period, I can tell you that this is not just a spur of the moment. Of course, the anger was there, and people came to ventilate that, and people came to, express their frustration over failing system. But at the same time, it was not just all of a sudden that everybody came together. It's years and years of work of women's movement that a lot of sensitization has happened in society. People are talking about it. Media has partnered with the women's organizations to build the issue up, and that is one one of the reasons why you saw not only just in Delhi, but and also I think she did mention about other cities, but I traveled everywhere in the country after the whole incident, and whether it is in Chhattisgarh, in Jharkhand, wherever we went, even village girls, even in for example Gujarat, they came out and they protested, and they said that we have to teach men and boys to behave. They must go through sex education. They must learn how to respect women and respect women's dignity. So I think this is something which has happened across the country after the rape case. And let me tell you that you have to look at it in a way that rape happens everywhere in the world. Rape even is being used as weapon of war. But at the same time, in India now, this is the historical moment where after such an unfortunate incident where the girl has to she died, she's no more with us, but as we call her the person who gave us that strength and courage to fight back, we immediately got the Verma Commission set up. The law has been changed, but we are still very, very worried about the implementation part of the law.
And I want to stop you there, Malika. I want to bring you into the conversation here. She's talking about we have to change the behavior, and we have to have education, we have to get people to think differently, and those are all great things to say. It's hugely different to make that happen. I know that your organization is part of a campaign called Ring the Bell, and it's to get 1 million men to raise their voices against violence toward women. Let's take a look before Malika talks about it.
सबसे पहले तो हम लोग अपने घर से इस चीज़ों को चालू कर रहे हैं।
किसी भी प्रकार की महिलाएं अगर समाज में या कहीं भी सामाजिक स्थलों पर अगर जा रही हैं तो उन्हें भी उस नज़रिए से, उस सम्मान से देखने की ज़रूरत है जिससे एक पुरुष को देखता है, क्योंकि महिलाओं की भी एक अधिकार होते हैं।
पुरुष समाज में हमको ये नहीं चाहिए कि हम महिलाओं को दबा करके रखें।
अपनी सोच को हमको बदलना पड़ेगा, जो पुरानी सोच है थोड़ा सा उसको बदलना पड़ेगा और नारी शक्ति को पहचानना पड़ेगा।
It's a great PSA. What kind of success have you had in mobilizing men to work toward this change?
So, we started the Ring the Bell campaign about 4 years ago in India, and in India it's called Bell Bajao. And we started the campaign with asking men to step in and interrupt domestic violence. I want to make the connection between what happens to women within the home and what happens to women on the streets, because we're talking a lot about sexual assault in public spaces, and we're talking a lot about what happens to women at the hands of strangers, but really the most unsafe space for women, not just in India, but in many parts of the world, is their homes. So you start with a culture where boys and girls are socialized differently, and one way in which I kind of think about it is that, the masculinity culture that we live with and that we live in is kind of running amok. So you start with, unequal sex ratios because female fetuses are terminated because they're female. Then you have child sexual abuse, you have trafficking, you have domestic violence, you have dowry-related problems. So you've got a whole spectrum of things happening to women in the home. And so the Bell Bajao campaign started with saying, you've got to interrupt domestic violence in the home, and men need to step up and challenge other men to stop that kind of behavior. We were very successful in creating a national conversation around that issue. We ended up in 4 soap operas in India. We ended up as a question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And we actually did studies pre and post campaign to look at attitude change and behavior change amongst men on this set of issues. The thing that was really exciting was that hundreds of men and women sent in stories of how they actually interrupted violence. So when the Delhi gang rape happened, a lot of the thousands of young people that we've been training as rights advocates in India for the last many years were on the streets, were mobilizing, were really involved in pushing the envelope to talking about a broader spectrum of violence against women. So on March 8th, we took the Bell Bajao campaign and made it ring the bell, 1 million men, 1 million promises to end violence against women. And what started in India actually became a global movement. And what I like to say is that, India was called the worst country in the world for women by a Thomson Reuters study on the G20. But in a way, what's happened post the Delhi gang rape is that we've become the leader in opening up a conversation around violence against women globally that's very different than what happened before. And we're being able to connect the dots and get men to step up. We've been very excited, particularly with the promise that the head of Google India made to us as part of the 1 Million Men campaign. And what he said, he's an angel investor, and what he said was that I'm not going to invest in any tech startups that don't have women as part of the core group for the year of 2013. We need promises like that. We need men to step up and make tangible, actionable promises about how they're going to challenge violence and discrimination against women in whatever spheres they have power in. We've got to get beyond the think about your mother, your daughter, your sister framework.
Well, speaking of getting beyond that, I want to go to Nishi now because I want to talk about how we get beyond that. On Google Plus, Nain says, laws won't suffice until and unless Indian males are taught to respect women and accept them as human beings. And then Patricia tweets in, educate men, change hundreds of years of culture, change the culture of the police. Now, I know that you and your brother do just that. You train police officials. What are some of the challenges that you face when you go into these, police departments? What are the things that you hear? What are you teaching them, and how can you change this?
Well, one of the biggest challenge is working with the law enforcement agency in India. They are the first response agency whenever there is a crime against women. They need to be sensitized day in and day out because the situation in the police station is very bad as crime against women or the victims when they reach out to the police station. They need to be sensitized at the mass level, and the mindset has to be changed. This is the major challenge which we in India are trying to counter it.
I want to bring in Manisha Mohan. You are a university student, you're an engineer, and you came up with some of your colleagues with anti-sexual harassment underwear. And when you say it, it sounds kind of funny. But when you put it in the framework of women taking it upon themselves to fight back when they think government and police aren't doing their jobs, it makes it quite serious. Tell us about this underwear that you developed.
It's about fighting against sexual harassment and eve-teasing and respective cases of rape which have come up in the recent past. The undergarment works with the help of electric circuit, which comprises of your pressure sensors, your electric shock circuit, GPS, and a GSM module. As soon as a man tries pinching, grabbing, or squeezing a woman's breast, the pressure sensor gets actuated and it sends out electric shock. And the intensity of the electric shock is such that of 3,800 kilovolts. And in that circumstance, the man has to withdraw his hand anyways. Apart from that, we have a GPS and a GSM module working parallelly to the system, which sends out rapid messages to the parent as well as the nearest police station with the last location of the woman, thereby alarming the parent as well as the police.
So what about the production of this? Is this something that's going to be mass produced and accessible to the average Indian woman?
Yes, we are working on the cost effectiveness of the device at the moment, and within next 2 months or so, we'll be done with the R&D stage of our equipment altogether.
Nainara, I want to go to you. You are part of a women's-only cab service in India. Again, just another example of what women are doing to help other women. Talk about this service and why it exists.
Well, the primary reason for the service is to level the playing field for women who need to be out there, who need to go to work, come back, ensure their children are going around the city safely. So we just wanted to provide a safe and alternate transport solution for women in urban India.
Malika, do you get the sense that sometimes change just can't happen from the top up, or it can't happen very fast, and it takes this groundswell of people and women and men from all different areas to kind of stir the pot and get things going?
Absolutely. I mean, culture change always requires all of us. And I think that the story around violence against women for all of these many decades has been that it's been seen as a women's issue. Yeah. It hasn't been understood and seen as a social issue, as a health issue, as a human rights issue, as an issue that really affects everyone. Because if you actually think about it, for someone who's growing up in a home where their mother is being battered by their father, the impact of that on the woman is profound, but the impact of that on the kids who are watching this unfold is also pretty profound.
It becomes normalized.
And guys who grow up in homes where there is violence against their mothers then think it's okay to go out and treat women in a certain way. And that's why I keep making the connection to home, because how we treat one another, how men and women treat one another, what kinds of ways in which we define redefine relationships, talk about respect, have a profound impact on then what happens on the streets, what happens in the schools, what happens in the workplace. Because if you bring boys up to think, A, that masculinity is about a rape culture, or that it's about demeaning anything that is feminine, then that's how they're going to act out in all of their different milieus. And that's why I think that talking about law enforcement, good laws, making an accountability system function in India, because really we have a crisis. We have a governance crisis of acute proportions, which isn't just around women, it's around a lot of different things. So we need the laws, we need them to be implemented, but we've got to do the culture shift and we've got to do the culture change around men and women. Otherwise, we're going to keep having to deal with it after the fact. You know, when I was growing up in Calcutta, I used to always travel with a big diaper safety pin, you know, those big safety pins that have like the big, and I mean, I literally used to have the safety pin open all the time in my hand to jab guys.
Did you ever have to use it?
Oh my God, all the time.
Seriously?
All the time. I mean, but the tragedy is that, you know, from that time of my childhood to now, women continue to have to navigate these spaces at home and publicly to constantly protect themselves. But I really feel like something's shifted. I really feel like just even having this conversation with everybody on Twitter joining us is changing the way in which boys and girls, men and women are thinking and talking about these things.
Nishi, we've got about 30 seconds left in the program. Why don't you wrap this up for us?
The thing is that I want to wrap it up with saying that the government response is lacking because the authorities are not aware that what is happening with the women are crimes. It is a mindset where many times they blame the victim. That needs to be changed.
Okay. On that note, we're going to pick up this conversation in our online post show, so we'd like you to head over to stream.aljazeera.com for that. But before you do, Malika's got a few other stories that we're following.
After nearly a year as Egypt's president, Mohamed Morsi knows he's a frequent punching bag on social media. But on Thursday, he took to Twitter to woo his toughest critics. Morsi answered questions on everything from summer power outages to accusations of government nepotism. But not everyone was won over. Mahmoud writes, "Sir, you won't respond to any question that criticizes you. You'll respond only to the Muslim Brotherhood." Morsi responded, saying, "If I saw your question first, it would have been the first question I answered." And he added, "The revolutionary youth have every regard for me. Isn't this Twitter account a letter from me to all the youth?" Well, the chats will be nightly, so we'll see if the online attention brings him offline goodwill. Our next lead follows Syrians who formed a new militia to defend the United States from North Korea. Have a look. Armed with crutches and wheelchairs, the men say they'll defend Washington in a not-so-subtle jab at the non-lethal U.S. aid reportedly offered to Syrian fighters. And our last lead's out of Indonesia, where a tourist with a hidden camera is exposing idyllic Bali's dark side. As reported on the site Indoboom, the tourist was stopped for driving a motorcycle without a helmet, but a policeman offers him a discount on the fine.
Yeah, I don't want to go to court. If you find the good justice, 1,250,000. Whoa. If you pay here, I give you 250, 200 for you. It's good for you.
Indonesians on YouTube are outraged, particularly when the policeman uses some of the fine to buy the tourist a beer. This policeman is despicable. He sold his own pride and the entire nation for only 100,000 rupiah and 4 bottles of beer. Well, let us know what you think of those stories. Just use the Twitter hashtag AJStream. Lisa?
All right, stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. On our next program, is there a digital fix for all societal problems? On Monday, we speak with Silicon Valley critic Evgeny Morozov. He's going to tell us about the dark side of big data and the dangers that we're ignoring in our quest for technological innovation. Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome to the Online Post Show at stream.aljazeera.com. Today we're talking about women falling prey to sexual harassment in India. We're joined by Malika Dutt, Nishi Kant, Ranjana Kumari, Nayantara Janardhan, and Manisha Mohan. Malika, I want to pick up with you. Let's talk a little bit about young people and social media and the role that plays with these gender issues in India.
Well, you know, when the Delhi gang rape happened, one of the things that happened immediately was that social media was all over it. It was only after almost a day of social media going nuts that mainstream media really started to pick up the story and move forward with it. And I think that the continuing focus of mainstream media on the issue of women's rights and what's happening to women in this context has stayed alive because the social media conversation has stayed alive, because young people have insisted on continuing to have that conversation. I just want to step back and talk about what's happening with India overall and where this sort of fits into that larger picture. Mm-hmm. You know, India is one of the BRIC countries, right? We're talking about the whole emergence of Brazil and Russia and India and China and these new economies. And as part of that new economy that India wants to be, there's a whole revolution in terms of this very large population of young people, jobs, and women entering the public space, particularly in urban areas, in a very different way than they historically have. So this young woman who was raped and died in Delhi was in the city studying, came from a very poor family, her first generation to be in an educational institution, coming back from a movie with her boyfriend, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a whole kind of reframing of gender relations in the country. So you've got these changing dynamics with young people who are aspirational, who want to be part of this new economy, this new vision of India in the 21st century. And you have this continuing patriarchal, feudal, very entrenched sense of women's inequality and the status of women continuing to be something that is really second-class citizen, right? So you've got these things colliding right now. So some of the ways in which you're seeing women in public space being attacked in more and more numbers is, one, because women are reporting it more, but two, because there's a huge shift going on in terms of how young men and women are interacting in society and in this new country that India is trying to become.
Well, I want to pick up on something that you mentioned at the beginning of that answer, and that was, how social media is changing things like this. We mentioned the underwear earlier in the main show. We mentioned the cabs, and we're going to go back to them in a bit, but there's also things like apps. I pulled up this one on my screen. This is from iTunes, and it mentions that it's now available in Hindi with hotlines customized for New Delhi, and it's basically something that you can download. Men can download, and when they're in trouble,
yep.
Yes, yeah. When they're in trouble, they can alert someone just from the touch of their touch screen. So things like that are changing the conversation clearly, but I want to go to our hangout now because there's a question from Alex, and she says, does gender segregation, like separate cars and cabs for women, help societies working to end sexual harassment? And Nayantara, I want to pose that question to you because you're the one who has this cab company, Women for Women. Is it helping to end sexual harassment?
I'm not sure whether this is the end solution that we want. Certainly, we don't think segregation is the way forward, and that that is going to keep women safe forever. But certainly, in the context that exists today, till society at large is more sensitized, this is just one way of keeping women safer in the public space and helping women, probably reclaim the public space.
Could you tell us your story also? I'm interested in how you even got this idea and why you decided to get involved in this and why you thought it was necessary.
Well, as Malika said, there's increased numbers of reportings of women being harassed in the public space, and while we agree and appreciate that almost 90% of rape happens behind the closed doors of a house and not in a public space, or rape or crimes against women, what we felt is that is something that we did not have immediate control over. We felt that one thing we could do was help women reclaim public spaces, and to take back public spaces, we feel that the only way we can do it is to have more women out there. The minute you have more women out in the public space, you will encourage even more women. It's going to have like a dominoes effect. And that's what we very firmly believe. So this is just, these are just baby steps towards that end.
Manisha Mohan, you're one of the inventors of the anti-sexual assault underwear. What do you say to those who criticize you and your invention and say all you're doing is you're putting the burden of rape back on the victim or the potential victim and you're not really dealing with the core issue?
See, whereas talking about India, we have a lot of eve-teasing, and that eve-teasing goes around, as I mentioned before, like, pulling out strings over the breast of a woman. So it's like we wanted some random solution, because a woman does not go to the court when she's molested at a platform, like in a public place, when she's traveling in a bus or she's traveling in a train. So in those circumstances, she cannot go to the police, running after to the courtrooms. So in order to give a self-punishment at there itself, at the same spot, we thought of something like that. Because after the Delhi gang rape, I was like, no man should even have the audacity to touch a woman. And it was that anger in me which came up with this device.
And
Go ahead.
Yes. And whereas people criticizing about it, it's like they either do not understand the pain the woman experiences after being molested, or they would actually be a part of the rapist groups who really want to come up, because we have a lot of people saying that we can come up with rubber gloves, and they really don't understand that if a common man is wearing rubber gloves in a public, he's obviously going to be identified as one of the rapists.
I just want to point out, that in the last 2 years in India, there have been a number of incidents where men have stepped in to challenge other men who have been harassing women and ended up getting killed. And that's another new phenomenon where men intercede not just with their girlfriend or a relative, but with watching men attack a woman that they may not even know, but where they have stepped in and gotten beaten up and actually died. And so that's part of what I mean in terms of sort of a new generation, which is guys understanding that they need to step up, that they need to challenge what's going on, and the fact that men are getting killed protecting women is a phenomenon that's been also written about and talked about a lot, which is why the earlier point that we were making about how important it is to get guys to stop. I mean, after all, what are we talking about? We're talking about male violence against women. We're not just talking about sort of random acts that happen out there. It's male violence against women. And, people like Manisha, this next gen, the anger is palpable. There's fierce energy out there, and there are new tools like new technologies and social media that allows this conversation to happen in a way that could never happen before. So that's why I kind of feel like we're at this sort of turning point. It also reminds me of what happened with Steubenville right here in the United States. Social media there played first the role of all of them tweeting the way in which this woman was raped and treated as if, hey, it's all good, it's all fine. And then social media played the role of completely changing the frame and saying, wait, this rape culture in the United States is not acceptable, right? So we're seeing this sort of play out in all these different ways, and I think it's really exciting to see where we can take this and how we can end violence against women.
Glad we got to have this conversation today. Malika Dutt and all of our other guests in the Google Plus Hangout, thank you so much for joining us. Now on Monday, we speak with Silicon Valley critic Evgeny Morozov. He is going to talk about the dark side of big data and the dangers we're ignoring in our quest for technological innovation. Until then, we'll see you online.